Okay, everybody, this is Jay Papasan. Welcome to the One Thing webinar for January. I'm very excited to share a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, time blocking. We're going to walk through the basics and even some advanced maneuvers today. So thanks so much for choosing to be here. Super excited to have what we fully expect to be a maxed out capacity webinar. Really quickly, just to kind of make sure everybody's aware of how this works. If it's your first time here, I'll give you a very quick orientation on the book, just the big idea, and we're going to dive right into the topic. So it's just me, Jay Papasan, co-author of the book. I'll be your host today. Throughout the webinar, you will have the opportunity to use the questions toolbar to ask questions. And at the end of the webinar, I'm going to try to get to as many as we can. I'm going to try to reserve at least 20 minutes at the end of this hour to address your specific questions about time blocking. And you can play Stump the Author. What's the worst challenge you faced on time blocking? And let's see if we can't solve it together. I would love for you to walk out today with more clarity about how you can make better commitments with your most precious resource, and that's time. So before I kind of launch into the actual webinar, just a real quick kind of announcement. It's definitely worth hanging out till the Q&A. The people on this webinar are going to be the very first to hear about a brand new product that we're releasing. Only going to have everybody here can sign up and be the very first people to participate in a really cool product that we've designed around time blocking. So hopefully you will absolutely be hanging in there to at least the 40-minute mark. All right, last little bit of housekeeping here. We are going to have about, let's say, 30 minutes of teaching, maybe 40. We're going to have Q&A at the end. You have the opportunity to ask questions at any time using the questions toolbar. And a reminder that if for some reason you lose your connection or you're unable to stay for the whole hour, we will be emailing a link of the recorded webinar to everyone who registered, so you don't have to miss the content. All right, so I want to get this thing started, and I want to get it started by finding out a little bit more about who is on this webinar. So let's use the questions toolbar. I just want to get a sense, and just write the letter, right? Who are you? You're hearing about time blocking for the first time. A, you know it's important and you need help. B, that's kind of me, like I always need help. C, I'm doing good and want to get better. Or D, I'm kicking butt and I'm seeking mastery. And as much as I want to, I won't necessarily call on the people who put D there and ask them specifically for their contribution. All right, so I'm seeing tons and tons of people that are in the B's and C's, right? They're getting started. There's a fair number of people who are going to want to know the big idea. I see some A's there. This is awesome. Folks, we're going to actually tabulate all of this and get an even better sense of how we can serve you in the future. I love Margaret. You're in squirrel syndrome. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Made me laugh out loud. All right. It looks like the vast majority of people here are going to be I know it's important and I need help. Well, congratulations. I think you're in the right place. I think that we can give you more clarity, and specifically, if you're willing to use the questions toolbar throughout this, we can hopefully help you with your very specific challenges. All right. So what's the big idea? For those who really are like, what is this One Thing book anyway? Someone told me to sign up. If you had to boil it down, the One Thing is really based on Pareto's principle, that the minority of your results are in Pareto's principle. The 80% of your results come from the minority of your actions, right? So 20% of your efforts give you 80% of your results. I kind of throw the numbers out. People just need to understand there's usually a handful of things that are contribute in a disproportionate sense to your result. Do you know what those are? Can you identify them? Do you have a mechanism? That's what this book is here to help you absolutely identify, and that's one of the exercises we'll do today, is identifying the one thing that maybe you should be time blocking so that you can improve your results. So what does that look like in practicality? We call this extreme Pareto. If you have a to-do list, like most of us, it's got a lot of stuff on it. Like in this example, 25 things. You go from 25, you take 20% of that, it'll go to 5%, down to 5. You go to 20% of that and you get to 1. So the whole idea of the One Thing is you're going to keep asking, what's the 20% of this? What's the 20% of this? What's the 20% of this? Until you get to the absolute essential idea at the heart of it. And that's what we believe is the one thing. I'm just going to address real quick. I see some people saying they're not seeing this. If you're on an iPhone, you will only hear it. There is only audio. If you are on the webinar tool, you should be seeing audio and visual. I also am noticing that the slides are a little slow, so I'm trying to hit them a little earlier. We got a full webinar here, folks, and I'm going to work with you all the way. So what's on the screen today, right now, is the focusing question. At the heart of the one thing is a question that actually came from years and years of consulting. And Gary tells the story in the book that he would be coaching his top people, his top business owners, his top associates, and a typical coaching call would end with, so, Jeff, what are you committed to doing between now and next week, our next call, to absolutely move the ball forward? And people would list out their top priorities. And it's the coach's job to immediately say when they get on the call the next week, how did you do, right? And what Gary started to notice was a pattern that people were doing some of the items, but not necessarily the highest priorities. And it was really kind of out of frustration over time that he started asking a different question. So if you can only get 3 things done, what are you going to do to move the ball forward? And then people would do maybe the second or the third, but not number 1. And it was really out of frustration that he finally said, look, if you can only get 1 thing done this week to move the ball forward, what's it going to be? And to kind of his utmost surprise, not only did everyone start doing their one thing, they often did all the other stuff that they didn't even talk about doing. So it tended to have kind of a rollover effect that by doing their most important work, a lot of the other stuff was getting done as well. So let's break this question down. It's the heart of the book. It's easy to underestimate if you haven't been immersed in the book, but it's a simple, elegant tool. What's the one thing I can do? That first phrase. It's not 2 things or 3 things. You're asking your brain to come up with one thing, not 2. And it's pretty good at coming up with a priority. What's something you can do, not could do, or would do, or should do? I often like to quote Shel Silverstein here. All the woulda, coulda, shouldas all ran away and hid from one little did. The point of the question here is to get you into action so that you can start getting results and feeling better about where you're going. The last 2 lines are really about you're looking for the biggest lever in your life, right? Such that by doing it, just says anything that I choose to do here has to have more than just a one-to-one impact, right? It's got to be leveraged. And the scale of that is the last part. Everything else will be easier or absolutely unnecessary. In my experience, we often get easier. We love to get unnecessary, but they don't always go hand in hand. So the next slide is lagging ever so slightly here. We're going to talk about what are the big areas in your life. What are the big areas in your life where you can apply this question to your life? And so I just want you to look at your screen and read through those really quickly. What's the one thing I can do for my spiritual life? What's the one thing I can do for my physical health? What's the one thing I can do for my personal life? Key relationships, job, business, finances. Obviously, your life is your life. If there's a big something there that's missing, you can feel free to write that in on your own little notebook. My wife and I ask these questions every year, and we often will write one, what's the one thing that we can do for our daughter, for our son, for our key relationships? We sometimes break those down. But these are the big ones, and the point that Gary often makes is this is a powerful tool. Don't just use it to pick out what movie you're going to watch on Netflix this weekend, right? It's really for the big stuff, the important stuff. Now, I want you to take a moment. If you've got a pen or paper, I'm going to pause for 1 second. I want you to grab something so you can write this down. We're about to do a quick exercise. No. All right, folks, here's the exercise. I would like you to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in each of these big areas. And if you wanted to add another one, that's cool. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you think you're doing in your spiritual life? On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing in your physical life? So just take a moment and score yourself in all 7 areas. For those of you who are listening and can't see the screen, I know some of you have let us know that. The first area is spiritual. How are you doing? Second is physical. How are you doing? Personal. Key relationships, your job, if you're a business owner, your business, and finally financial. And there's a point to this exercise. All right, so hopefully you've gone through there. Don't think about it too long. Just go with your gut. Now I want you to take a second step. I want you to underline or underscore what's the area, where do you have the 9s and 10s, right? What's your absolute area that you're absolutely nailing it? And then also, where's your lowest score? All right, so just take a moment and identify where's your top and where's your biggest opportunity for growth. Someone's asking, what's the difference between job and business? Even if you're the business owner, you have a job in that business, right? My wife owns a real estate company. Her number one job, besides being the CEO, is right now she's listing homes. That's her job in the business. So you have a one thing for that job, and she has a one thing for the business owner, and that's how we separate it, right? Southwest Airlines, what's their one thing? It's to be the low-cost airlines, and that led to many things. So if you don't have a business or own one, you don't have to answer that. So you've got your lows, you've got your highs. I want you to now mentally, right? This is about time blocking. Make a choice in your head. Make a choice. If I can only work on one thing, and we all know about a book that tells you that's where you should at least start with one thing, which area would you choose and what would your score be in it? And if you want to share that, awesome. I would love to hear that. That would give us a real sense of the areas where people are focusing. We had an app a few years back, and it was pretty curious. They went pretty much in that order. Had a lot of people who focused on spiritual habits and then physical habits, and it kind of worked its way all the way down. I'm seeing that here too. Spiritual, finance, key relationships, job, physical. A lot of people, the physical can create some real pain in our lives when it's not working correctly. Awesome. All right, so that clarity is one of the things that's going to be guiding you through the rest of this webinar. All right, so this next slide kind of states the obvious. Knowing your one thing is not the same as doing your one thing, right? We all get this, right? Otherwise, we'd all be living perfect lives. We would have our intentions in our head, and then they would happen in our lives. Doesn't really happen that way, does it? All right, so that's the point of time blocking. So I just want you to think really quick. You've got this thing you just identified. Maybe it's a strength, right, that you know you could be better at. Maybe it's your biggest challenge that you know you need to get better at. Right now, it's causing just enough pain to maybe make you aware of it. Maybe that's why you're on this webinar today, is I really need to focus on that thing. Chances are the pain isn't so great to have consequences to really, really force you to corral more resources around it. That's the reality of a lot of the things that we start with in time blocking. Right now, the pain is pretty small. So I want you to go out 5 years. If nothing were to change around this core activity, this really important circle of your life, your physical life, your business life, your job, if nothing were to change in 5 years, would the consequences be bigger? Would there be a bigger cost to pay? Because a lot of times we underestimate the impact of what's small today and how it can become exponential in the future. Now, chances are you're thinking about this, that's not a fun feeling, so let's just flip it immediately. What happens if today you make a commitment to time block that thing and start making a real 100% effort to, one, get better, to do it more often, to do it with higher efficiency? You're going to make that thing, your most important thing, better. Now go forward 5 years. What would be the things that you would now be enjoying that you couldn't enjoy without that? And just hold that thought in your head for a moment. That vision is really important, and I find it personally tremendously motivating. The first half can be kind of the cost, the pain, and this is also what maybe we're driving towards, the life that we want to live. So hold that thought in your head, and let's talk about how can we effectively time block that and turn it into an activity. So why do we even call it time blocking? Time blocking, I love this idea because it's something you already do. Chances are, you followed it to be here for this webinar, right? Time blocking is a calendar appointment, but instead of it being with something else or someone else, it's with yourself. It's a very simple activity, and I love the fact that we already all know how to follow it. We know how to follow an appointment. we have to be somewhere at a certain place or time. But what Gary observed very early in life is that the most successful people make appointments with themselves. You know, what's really funny is when I first interviewed with him, and this would have been in the summer of 2002, walked into his office. He had found out that I had a publishing background. I had discovered that he wanted to write books. There's that story I often tell about how we kind of ran into each other literally in the bathroom and had this discovery. Like the next day, I'm writing books with him. So he goes through the formal interview process with me, even though we're kind of already started. But he's going to check all of everything. And I remember going into his office and he said, did you bring your calendar with you? Now remember, this is 2002. Like, not everybody had a smartphone back then with Outlook calendars. I still had a checkbook size paper calendar that I carried in my back wallet. And I handed it over to him and he said, do you mind if I look through this? And he looked through it and he was looking to see if I only made appointments with other people or if I had tasks that I needed to do in that calendar. Lucky for me, I'm very, very much an introvert. So I didn't have a lot of social calendar appointments anyway, and I would have my to-do list on every day. And I guess I passed mustard because here it is 14 years later and we're still cooking. But that's an idea of how important he thought this aspect was in terms of people that he felt had potential to really change the world and who he wanted to hang out with, right? Time blocking. It's setting appointments with yourself to do your most important work. And remember, in that exercise, hopefully you identified an area where you have a real opportunity to create change in your life. So why do we know this works? What's great is we actually found a study after the book was coming out, and it's sad, it was out there in 2010, so we just missed it. But this is a study from the British Journal of Health Psychology. And what they did is they asked 3 groups of people to exercise for 20 minutes a day. They had a control group. And if you know anything about the scientific method, there always has to be the group, right, that they get no real instructions. They're just told, go exercise 20 minutes a day for the next 2 weeks. Group 2, if you have a screen, you can see they're the motivation group. They were given a pamphlet that said, if you exercise for 20 minutes a day, you get all these benefits. You'll feel better. You'll have more energy. You're less likely to have a heart attack, right? The last group they called the intention group. They got that same pamphlet, right, as the motivation group, but they got something else, one more assignment. And if you're looking here, the control group was 38% effective. The motivation group was 35% effective. But the intention group, 91% of them exercised for 20 minutes for 2 weeks. What did they have to do? They simply had to write down, on this day, at this time, at this place, I will exercise for 20 minutes. So the time, the place, and the activity was what they had to be intentional about. Well, I don't know about you, that sounds a lot like a calendar invite to me. It's all the same ingredients. And so I see this play out all the time. I have people on my team, I'm laying out assignments saying, we really need help in this. And someone says, I'll do that. If I happen to know that person is pretty much redlined, one of the questions I'll ask as their leader is, hey, Jeff, by the way, when are you going to do that? What you'll then see is them processing. Do they actually have time to do the thing they want to do? We all have a tendency to say yes and make commitments even when we don't have that. So the simple act of being organized enough to go to your calendar and saying, wow, I need 4 hours to get this done, or however many hours, and putting that commitment on your calendar, you're 3 times as likely to succeed. Now, I want to make one point here. Almost every book that I've had the privilege to write with Gary Keller, we've had an area called your big why, right? And the one thing we talk about, purpose. We really fundamentally believe in motivation. And so I've had people ask me, do we think that motivation is just kind of hot air? I'm like, absolutely not. But I believe if you put a when and where with your why, that's how you become unstoppable, right? Your why is absolutely there. And remember, the intention group also was given the motivation, but they put a when, right, and a where with that, and that's how they had the wherewithal to get it done. That was a cute turn of phrase. I don't think I can say that 3 times. All right, so let's break this down. What does time blocking actually look like? On your screen, we've got a large monthly calendar. So if we just kind of mapped it out, You don't need to time block everything, just like you don't need to ask the fundamental question, the focusing question in every area of your life. So first thing I want you to do with your calendar, I want you to time block your time off. The subtitle to this book is Extraordinary Success. And if you are headed for extraordinary success, you are going to need to rest and recuperate to continue that journey. This is a really big deal, and it's one of the first things I coach my young people that work with me on. Early in the year, plan your vacations, even your potential vacations. Get them on the books. That way, when you're making a commitment, you'll be saying, you know what, I'm going to be gone the first week in June. Can we do it the second week? You'll start planning your work around your vacations instead of working during your vacations. And I got to tell you, I see way too many laptops on the beach when I'm on vacation. I'd much rather see someone reading their Kindle or a novel and truly relaxing. But that's one of the fundamental ways to make that happen. And as an employer, if someone asks for a vacation time 6 months in advance, what am I likely to say? I'm going to say yes. If they wait till 2 weeks out, now everyone has to work around their vacation, and you might have to say no, and nobody wants to do that. So ironically, the second thing that goes on your calendar isn't your one thing, right? The first thing isn't your one thing, it's your time off. Your second thing is your one thing. Now, we didn't cover all the lies. We didn't have time to cover all of that for this webinar, but I want you to notice, you're going to time block your one thing. It's either 5 days a week or 7 days a week, whatever the habit is. I want you to do it in the morning. And I'm going to hit this a few times throughout this webinar, and I'm sure in the Q&A. But to really, if you want to make a behavior automatic, if you want to make doing whatever this one thing is, I don't care if it's flossing your teeth, reading a great book, making your sales calls, exercising, whatever that is, if you want to make it automatic, if you want to make it a habit, your chances are best if you try to do that before noon. We typically have the most willpower there. And when we have the most willpower, we're most likely to do it, even on the days when we don't. And on a practical level, just think about your own lives. In the morning, before 8 o'clock, right? We all hopefully have to get up at least that early to get to work. There's not a lot going on, right? You have to maybe get the kids to school. You have to walk the dog. But there's not like pressing television or sports to watch. There's not a lot of fires that have gone off in your world. There's a lot more peace, there's a lot more control in your mornings, and that is a really big deal, folks, if you want to make your one thing stick. And the third most important thing that I want you to time block, and if you only did these three things, I would tell you, you're probably okay, is your planning time. And here's how it works. At least on a weekly basis, you need to get your goals out, and you need to get your calendar out. And so based on my commitment, my goals, what I want to accomplish, you then look at your calendar and ask the question, do I have enough time to accomplish my goals? It's that simple. If you don't have enough time, then you're going to steal it from something else. If you lose time, let's say that your goal was to do, 50 push-ups a day for 100 days in a row, whatever, but you got something happened, you got sick, you got the flu. Well, successful people won't just tack on 2 extra days at the end. What they'll do is as fast as they can, they'll regain that momentum. So they'll do 100, push-ups for one day, or maybe 70, and as quickly as they can, they'll regain that lost ground. So we can't play the game of, oh, I missed a week, I'll just add a week to my goal. No, double down as often as you can so that you can recapture that activity and that repetition time in whatever it is that you're doing as fast as you can, because you may not get that extra week, folks. There's no guarantee that that will be waiting for you. So that's the fundamentals. I'm going to show you in a couple of slides here what my calendar looks like with multiple habits mapped out. But for now, I'm going to give you one more strategy. This didn't actually make it into the book. We wrote about it, and it was one of the things that we had to cut. But there's a scientist at Stanford University named B.J. Fogg. He was the head of their behavioral design lab, and I got a chance to hear him speak at South by Southwest. Pretty amazing guy, but he got 10,000 people to start flossing their teeth with this simple formula before you. After I establish habit, which in this case was brush my teeth, I will new habit. In this case, he said floss one tooth. Now you might say, did I hear him correctly? Did he say one tooth? And that was exactly it. He wanted to create a system whereby they had the smallest possible hurdle to jump over on a daily basis, so they could always cry victory. And here's the reality. If you take the time to pull the floss out of the box, are you really just going to do one tooth? Probably not. You have the option if you're really pressed for time, but more often than not, people develop the habit of actually flossing their teeth daily. And there's some research that suggests that other than like quitting heroin or smoking, that is, in terms of longevity of your life, the thing that will add the most years to your life. Up to 6 years just flossing your teeth. Pretty amazing. So he can think of all those people he helped, 10,000 times 6 years. That's a pretty cool thing. So here's how this works for us. If you looked at that calendar on the last slide and said, you know what, my days are so chaotic, the idea of starting something every day at 8 o'clock just sounds alien. I get it. That happens. So pick something that's already an anchor in your life. So after I wake up, I will X. After I brush my teeth, I will do whatever that is. After I drop the kids off at school, right? And any parent will tell you that's not the same time every day, right? There's always a bit of chaos in that process. But after I do that, this will happen. So pick an anchor, something you already are committed to doing. After I walk into work, I have 5 minutes and then I must blank. You can do it on the other side, right? Before I go to sleep, after I have dinner, like what's something that you know will happen? That absolutely is a valid way to time block as well, but you need an anchor. In time blocking, we're using time as the anchor. You can also use a habit. So now I'm going to share with you, during the writing of the book, my wife and I would confer and say, what do you think our one thing with the kids is, all these things. And over time, we built out a pretty cool construct of what our week looks like. So if you look really closely, I've just divided my week into 4 big slots, right? Early morning, afternoon, and evening. My big takeaway here is not to tell you what my one thing is in all of these areas. I want you to look and say, where is most of the action happening? 5 of our 7 core habits happen before noon. They're either happening before we go to work, on the way to work, or right when we get to work. And that's because that's how we found, one through research and also through our own lives, that we were most likely to do those behaviors on a regular basis is if we did them in the morning. An example here at the very top, you'll see that on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, for, 4 years now, we've pretty religiously worked out. My wife and I needed to do this. I had a back surgery, right? And the only time that we could find that we could do it together and not pay a babysitter was at 5 a.m. So that was our construct. Did I like getting up that early? No, I did not. Now I'm actually conditioned to wake up early. Today I didn't have to work out. I woke up at 4:46 anyway. And I wasn't sleepy because I'm actually habitual about that now. And I use that time for other things on my off days. So ask the question, how much would my world change if that thing that I haven't been doing consistently, what if I just set my alarm 30 minutes earlier and started doing it then? Would I have more control of my life? It's a really good technique. So that's the whole big picture there. What does it look like? Where do I put it on my calendar? And I would tell you, if at all possible, do it in the mornings. You'll notice that the 2 at the evening, one's gratitude. We do that with our kids at our dinner table. And date night, I just got to say that's a lot better at night than in the morning. So that's why it's in the evening. Okay, so here's kind of the final bit of instruction. We're going to talk about getting it on your calendar is really half the battle. It's a huge thing. But then protecting that time is something we hear from a lot of people that they have challenges with. So I'm going to address some of those, but I'm going to give you a quick reminder. If you haven't used the questions toolbar, go ahead and take a second and say, what is the help that I need that I could get on this webinar? So if at all possible, right, give us a question in the questions toolbar. Say, I'm struggling with X. What advice would you give to someone who is doing X? And as many of those as I can, I will get to them. In about 4 or 5 minutes here, we'll be on to that material. We'll have a good amount of time. All right, so protecting your time block. Step number 1, I want you to find or build a bunker. Now, we know what a bunker is in the military sense, right? It's a protected space. I want you to find a place in your life that you feel your focus on this activity will be protected. So, everybody is different. I had the opportunity to work from home for many years. I was very ineffective at that. I would look up, I would see the dishes needing to be done, I would see all kinds of work, and I would rationalize, my wife is far more important than my work. She'll be so happy if I mow the yard instead of doing my assignment. No, she won't. But I could rationalize it, and there was no one there to hold me accountable. Personally, my bunker, I want a closed door, and I want to be in a public setting. For whatever reason, I'm going to stick to my guns there. I'm much better. So think for yourself, where is that space? Is it in a cafe with a laptop? Is it like in a hammock in the backyard? I don't care. Identify your bunker. 2, store provisions. Wherever it is that you want to go to be productive, that you feel you'll be productive, take everything you're going to need for the job. If you looked in my backpack that I take with me when I speak, that I take with me when I go downstairs to write in Gary's office, I've got my laptop, I've got pens, paper, I've even got aspirin, I've got everything I need to be productive that's with me all the time. Ask that question, what am I going to need, and take it with you. What you don't want to have happen is you didn't bring water, right? You don't have a snack and you're really in a rhythm. So you step out of your protected bunker, you're walking across the office space, and it just happens every single time. Hey, Jay, I'm so happy you stepped out. I just have one quick question. Well, first off, there's no such thing as a quick question. We all know this, right? This now becomes a real tension. Am I going to tell a teammate, a coworker, I'm sorry, you're not my one thing? That's really hard to do. You better be on a mission that they understand, or that's just not going to sell. Now you're going to have to lose some of your time and focus and probably help your teammate, but it's your fault. You left your bunker. We call that getting sniped, right? It's your fault if you step out of the protection, folks. So take and store provisions. Number 3, sweep for minds. Is there anything in your bunker that you know will be a temptation? If so, remove it. For most of us, it's our cell phones, folks. Maybe it's that extra monitor that you might have Twitter or Facebook on. When you're in your one thing time, when you're doing your most important activity, how can you make those things go away? It took me a week and continual maintenance to make all the notifications on my phone go away. I don't need little alerts popping up when I'm trying to write or teach. When I'm writing, I'm in a browser that has no passwords, right, that are saved in it. I'm in a place where it would become very difficult for me to hop onto Facebook. It's multiple steps now. So as much as I can, I sweep for minds. And this 4th one, while maybe not as inherently practical in terms of what can I specifically do, it's incredibly powerful. Enlist support. Tell your coworkers, tell your family, who are the people who have the power or the pull to pull you out of your bunker, right? Because, you know, if you hear your child crying, boom, you're going to go to that, and that's the right thing to do. If you hear your boss calling, you're going to do that too. How can you communicate to them the importance of this time? That's a big deal. Hey, folks, from this time to this time, I'm going to be working on something that's really important. What I need you to do is help me, 1, stay in there. If you see me out, I want you to send me back. 2, if you have a question, if it's at all possible, can you hold it till after? Think of it as going to the movies, folks. If you were going to the movies, you would not want someone tapping on your shoulder every 5 minutes. But so often in our work environment, we don't get that respect. We have to ask for it. If you walked around our offices, you will see all kinds of signs, and I sometimes post them on Instagram. You know, hey, I'm sorry, I don't want to say no, so let this sign say it for me. I'm working on my one thing. People will hang it on their cubicle. They'll put it on their door handle. If you looked really carefully at your copy of the one thing, there's actually one of those in the back of the book. You can hang that on your cubicle. You can hang it on your workspace and let people know that when this is up, I'm actually in my really high focus time. Please respect that. So come up with cues in your environment to let them know. All right, so we're about to transition to our Q&A portion, and I want to share something super exciting with you. Last fall, we did an email survey that went out to 40,000 plus people that were fans of the one thing, and we asked them, what are you struggling with most? 47% responded, time blocking, battling distractions, which is probably why a lot of you are here on this call too. So we made a commitment that we were going to create an online course that will specifically address time blocking, that'll have 10 weeks of accountability, 66 days built into it. And so the link on your screen, and I believe that my pal Ian is going to chat it to you. So if you just wanted to click on it, You can visit that page, give us your email address, and you'll be the very first people to hear when this is released. Super cool. Definitely be the first ones in line. The first launch of this, we're only going to allow 100 people to take the course because we want to get it absolutely right for them and absolutely get it right. So definitely click on theonething.com/time blocking. Check it out before or after this webinar and let us get your email address. Let us tell you when this is ready. I want you to get your invite so you can hear more about this. All right. So let's get to the Q&A portion. I'm so excited about this. I can't tell you. I've wanted to tell people about this for months and months, but it's finally just about ready to go. It's going to be released in about 2 weeks, folks. So theonething.com/time blocking. All right, so I'm going to go to the questions. I'm going to start scrolling up here. I've got Ian and Jeff. They're looking at your questions and flagging them for me. Let me see if I can find the first one here. All right. I'm going to say, all right, let me start with Aggie. Aggie coach, I'm assuming is not an Aggie as in the Texas sense. So how do I get my husband involved, right? Y'all are not doing the same thing. One person has got a 9-to-5 job and the other person does not. This happens a lot. This is when we talk about enlisting support. So I'm not completely sure from your question whether you are having trouble enlisting his support in your time blocking or getting him to time block. I'm going to presume it's the former, right? That you are trying to time block and you're wanting that respect for that. So it first begins with communicating. What are you trying to accomplish? Why is it important, not just for you, but for your relationship? It's almost always the best practice when you're trying to communicate a no to someone is for them to hear the benefit of why you're saying no to, I'm not available at this time, but I will be available later. So that functionally, I believe, if I've read your question correctly, is going to be a question of how do I communicate this effectively so they understand that it's really vital for me to do it. Next, I've got one from Mark. Do you have numerous one things throughout the week for each category? For example, Monday, Wednesday, spiritual, Tuesday, Thursday, physical. All right, great question, Mark. I said it pretty fast. You may have missed it. When I showed you my calendar where I had essentially 7 of my one things showing, what I maybe didn't say clearly enough was that my wife and I tackled those one at a time. We would institute a new habit in the family or with ourselves, and we would not really focus on anything else until that habit was established. So we weren't establishing habits in all those areas at the same time. So you can have many, many power habits in your life. If you listen to interviews of really successful people, I know I like to listen to Tim Ferriss. He'll often ask, what are your morning rituals, right? He's tapped into this, and you'll hear people, every day when I get up, I blank, blank, blank. Maybe it's meditate, journal, exercise, have a green smoothie. And they probably built those methodically over time. They were doing one thing in the morning, they heard about this thing that they knew they needed to do, and then they added that to the list. So yes, you can have multiple one things. I know that sounds contrary, but you can pick a challenge today, but it's only one thing at a time, Mark. So pick one thing to focus on, and whatever category that was, establish it. And when you really feel like that's in your back pocket, like I'm trying to wake up earlier, I'm now waking up before my alarm clock goes off, probably got a good indication that that habit is set. It's time to add the next one. I've got another question from, hopefully I answered your question there for you, Mark. Dana Young. So this is someone who works in a company environment with a micromanager who has some trust issues. Okay, we've all been there before, right? How do you ask for understanding of the one thing bunker time needed to meet project deadlines? Boy, we had a small section in the book about this. There are some enlightened workplaces that, as a matter of institutionalizing time blocking, we talked about the Y Combinator, and they have maker time in the mornings, and you can't even schedule a meeting. I got the privilege of hanging out with Brett Harris, who's the Chief Investment Officer at the Teachers Retirement Fund of Texas, like one of the 5 largest pension funds in the world. And he instituted one thing time for 2 hours every day. So obviously that's not your boss, but we've all had bosses that weren't that enlightened. First thing is buy-in. Is there an opportunity for you to ask permission to get a period of time that you could have just for yourself? And I think it's about selling the benefits. So like, just say the boss is me, Jay, I understand you want to know that I'm on track for my goals. When would be a good time for me to really put my headphones on? I feel like I can do the highest quality work if I can just get a block of time and really crank on our assignments. When would be the best time for that to work for you, that you're unlikely to need me, so that I can feel like that's a time I can work on? So you can start by asking questions, not permission, not can I do this, when would be the best time? Hopefully they'll say in the morning, but like I leave at 4:30 every day, you can do it then. Would it be okay if I did that over my lunch break? If you're really, really committed to having extraordinary success, I know people who will do that before they get to work and then demonstrate that because they had focus, they could do this and then seek permission for doing that activity during work. So I think it starts with a question. When is the best time for me to do this? Assume they're going to say yes to your doing it. And I would start with a small chunk of time, 30 minutes, an hour, before you went for the big blocks of time. Build up to that. When they see the benefit of your getting focus time, you'll get more entitlement to it. In the book, we tell the story of an EA who started with just an hour every day, and we had to find an office in the basement. It was an old, not largely unused conference room. She would go there to the basement, bring all of her writing materials, and work for like an hour. And eventually, we stretched that out to 2. But it really took about 2 weeks for everybody to get used to it. There's this little sign on her desk, kind of like she was on vacation. Hey, I'm going to be gone from 9 to 10. I'll be returning all calls and emails then. And people, after a couple of weeks, got trained that it was okay for her to be gone then, because they knew when they would get her back. So communicate, Dana, and ask for the best possible fit on when that will work, so that you're starting with some accommodation. All right, we've got Jill. I need a detailed method on how to organize my time at work and home. After reading your book, I am reading Getting Things Done. Do you have suggestions? All right, so a detailed method to organize your time at work and at home. I think that time blocking, I don't know if you want to live in the digital world or if you want to live in the physical world, but I'll give you examples of both. I would go with time blocking. I'm an absolute adherent of that, that's what you need to do. We have a piece of paper, we call it our 411, and really all we have on that is what are our big rocks? And each week I look on my calendar and I make sure I have time to tackle the most important ones. So get a week at a glance. If you want, I have a month at a glance, and all I have is the very first that things go on there are for my work, my writing days. And then, I also have my children's birthdays. I have our social things. I have the work life. The big stuff is on a paper calendar, so I can look at my month or my week and say, do I have enough time with those most important things to get things done? I have a good friend who does this with Google Calendars, and he just has the month at a view, and he uses color for the 2 areas of his life. And he can quickly see if he's getting all work and no play, or all play and no work. So start really simple. Use a binary system. You offered up work and home time. So that's your professional time and your personal time. Just come up with a simple calendaring so that you can start to see the pattern and then make small adjustments. I'm a true believer in the domino run. What starts as a 2-inch domino can then knock over a 3-inch and then a 4.5-inch, all the way into those giant leaps. So start small so you can feel the success, but that's a simple system. That's actually what Gary Keller does. He has a month at a glance, and I can look at his calendar and see the W's with a circle around them that say those are his writing days, and he knows that he has to have a certain number of them for us to hit our goals. All right. Let's see here, folks. I've got one from Kelsey. Do you recommend we focus one area at a time or one thing in each area? Can I say yes and yes? I think it's okay if you want to go around the 7 circles, and that's on page 114 of the book, that slide. This is my favorite page in the book. And identify what would be your one thing. That's totally cool to get that clarity. But in terms of executing them, Kelsey, I definitely think that you need to focus on one at a time. We have a whole chapter on there about discipline. and it's about the formation of habits. And just to kind of, hit it right on the head, it takes about, let me say, 66 days on average to form a habit. Now, average is very dangerous, right? What's the average temperature in North America right now? Who cares, right? I have to wear a jacket or not in Austin, Texas. So how many days it takes you to form a habit will be true to you. So that's one of the reasons I say pay attention. When it gets really easy, when it feels habitual, then move to the next one. So do one at a time. And the exercise we role played earlier was really to identify, I usually want to say, do I want to take my number one strength and improve it, which is a really not a bad strategy, or do I want to take my greatest area of opportunity, my pain point, and try to raise that up? And I usually focus on one end of the spectrum or another. You can choose whichever you like, but definitely one at a time. Great question. Always needs to be asked, whether, if someone else doesn't ask it, I'm going to ask it for them. Let's see here. Carlos, how do you time block the one thing in each category in the morning? There's a good book by my friend Hal Elrod called Miracle Morning, and he walks people through how to do 6 of these habits in an hour. My only thing, I was on his show, he was kind of one of the people I interviewed. I just said, dude, the only complaint I have is tell them to start with one thing and then add the next. I did some research. I was looking into habits and wealth, actually, Carlos, and this is an interesting fact discovered by the guy who wrote a book called Rich Habits. He discovered, he had an accounting firm in DC. He discovered that people of high net worth, millionaires, on average got up 3 hours before they had to go to work. So millionaires get up 3 hours before they go to work. I immediately was like, of course they do. They've got a lot to do before they get to work. They've got to work out. They've got to read a book. They've got to journal. They've got to meditate. You listen to people who are really extraordinarily successful, you often will see that pattern. So the time blocking in the morning to me is rituals. Like I get up and I know what my game plan is, and it's very similar almost every day. I have the workout days and I have the non-workout days, and on the non-workout days I tend to read. So that's it. You have your pattern in the morning, and once you get it set, I mean, think about getting to the coffee machine. You need almost zero cognitive awareness to get to that machine and press go. If you have a ritual in the morning, you can follow it. All right, so I've got a long question from Christine next. Question, I keep hearing about mornings. When I hear about time blocking, what if you're a night owl? Okay, great question. I hate mornings. Doesn't being my own boss mean I can set my own hours? Absolutely, Christine. Have you ever seen someone with that thought process succeed, or am I doomed? No, you're not doomed. I hope you're still here. In other words, do I need to change my schedule? Okay, well, I was a night owl too. I'm a writer, right? I love to be up in the wee hours of the night watching a black and white movie or reading a book or writing, right? That was who I was for probably more than half of my life so far. My children taught me the habit of waking up early. That's just the honest truth. Gus was an early riser. He would wake up at 5, and I was on bottle duty first thing in the morning because Wendy was the one that got woke up in the middle of the night. So that was my job. I got used to waking up, and what I discovered is that as much as I thought I wasn't a morning person, I was just fine as a morning person once I got used to it. So there is a chance that you could change that if you feel the need. But here's the thing. If you get up at roughly the same time every day, let's say your morning starts at 9 a.m. Fine. That's your morning. But can you start getting up before you have to get to work so that you can get some time that you absolutely control? There's no one else messing with that time, and start doing those activities. What I found is when you have a good enough reason to get up in the morning, you'll go to bed. And somebody was trying to learn to write a novel and asked me, like, I know I read all these books and they all got up in the morning before their kids were up or their wife was at work, and that seems to be the pattern. And I was like, you're right. And so why don't we first start with teaching you just to get up an hour before you normally get up. So it's just 1 hour change in your life. 2 strategies. 1, wait till the time change and don't change your sleeping habits, right? You get to that fall back. Everybody says, I get an extra hour of sleep. Well, instead of doing that, just keep your sleep pattern with no disruption, and you just got an hour in your morning. Unfortunately, that's about 7 months away. The other way to do it is, why don't you start just getting up 30 minutes earlier than you normally do? And instead of making that then something that you have to work on, like do yoga or work out, unless that really is something you're excited about, why don't you just treat yourself to something? Why don't you binge watch, Game of Thrones and say, tomorrow I get to watch the next episode. I can't wait to wake up in the morning. Find something that will get you excited to get up. I'm just asking, not that you start getting up at 5 a.m. Find time in the morning when you have willpower, whenever your morning is, and when you're not at work, so you control your time, and start building your habits there. So let me recap. You're not doomed. You don't have to be a morning person, but you do need to find time in your mornings consistently so that you can start building these habits. And that just means you probably need to figure out, is there a time I can comfortably commit to getting up every day? And then I'm going to make sure I don't set any appointments with other people until a certain amount of time after that so that I can have that me time to work on me. I hope that made sense for you, Christine. All right, great question though. All right, I see Kelsey going by here. Aaron. Okay, so Aaron says, what's the best advice to keep someone from breaking appointments with themselves? I'm never late for a client, but I can't hold myself to my own grand plans. Wow, I've been there. That's a big one. So there's two things. If you're breaking your own appointments with yourself, I would ask you, how important are they really? I don't think that we miss the things that we truly value. And so, one of the things when Gary holds me accountable, who's one of my coaches, if he sees something lingering on my to-do list or my success list or my goal sheet, one of the things he'll say is like, I've seen this hanging around. Obviously, you're not getting it done. Let's have the honest answer. Is this really important, or is this just something you thought you had to do? So that's the first stage. You have, as an adult, you have the opportunity to let yourself off the hook with that activity. If it is important and you're not succeeding, then you have a couple of choices. You can bring reward into the equation. So make your goals public with someone you trust, and if you do X certain times in a row, you get Y. You can do punishment. That seems to be very good motivation. Like I had a neighbor that was really trying to be good at something, and so they were going to write a check to an organization they did not believe in and give me the addressed stamped envelope, and if they didn't do it by a certain time, my only job was to put it in the mail. So you can have a consequence, right? However you want to do. Use a peer partner. I will tell you the absolute number one way to make that happen is to find someone to be your coach. We did that research in the book. If someone is bringing accountability in a meaningful way to your life, right, even if it's every 2 weeks, right, which I found in the study to be very light accountability, I get my coach, most of the people I know are getting that every week. But even if it's just an email correspondence every 2 weeks, people were 76% more likely to achieve their goals. So if you want the ultimate how-to, if you're failing and failing and failing, is invest in a coach and therefore invest in yourself to make that thing happen. All right, we got time for maybe 2 more. Our hour is winding down. Thank you all so much for all these questions. If we don't get to some of them and you really are like, please answer this question, hit me up on Facebook, hit me up on Twitter. You've got my address right there. So Rebecca asks, what is the best way that I can facilitate and hold someone else accountable to time blocking without being controlling or annoying? Well, I didn't mean to, but I just kind of gave you a couple of methods. My psychologist friend was the one who taught me the punishment method, right? Have someone write a letter to someone they don't appreciate that says you were right all along or something like that. It can be a check to an organization that's not evil, right, but they don't support like maybe another political party, and that's a consequence. And I just would tell you, if you don't want to be controlling or annoying, I always think that they have to set the consequence or the reward, and they have to establish the rules. And I've done this many times. Like, okay, so every week you're going to text me what you did, right? Okay, that's cool with you. If you don't text me, what am I supposed to do? And they have to set the consequences. I say, do you get 1 strike, 2 strikes, or 3 strikes? And they get to decide. I really try to think it through. That way, if it's on the other side, I can remind them, hey, you set the rules. We just agreed that we would not change the rules after we started. So come up with some rules that they either establish or they agree is fair, and then just hold them accountable to it. Accountability is not anyone holding a stick. It's someone asking a question. Did you do it, yes or no, and how do you feel about it? It's really that simple. Good luck, Rebecca. If I think about this in the context of being a parent, right? It's part of our job there, and that can be the toughest accountability relationship. All right, I'm going to try to fly through a few more of these before we run out of time. Mark. Nope, I've already covered that one. And Dana, let me see if I can find another one. We're getting maybe towards the end here. Okay. Bum, bum, bum. Scrolling down. Lots of comments. Lots of people volunteering their one things, and I really appreciate you guys that are sharing. Okay, Mike, any recommendations in a situation where something unavoidable changes your construct? We have a rule. We call it, if you erase, you must replace. And that works like in the old calendaring situation. But it go back to, let's say that every day you've made a commitment to practice your typing skills or to write 15 pages in your novel. That day you get a call from the principal and your daughter's sick and you have to go take her home. Well, clearly your one thing has changed and you should be focusing on your sick child, not on your novel or whatever that was. You need now to take the hour that you lost and immediately find time on your calendar to replace it. So that's how we deal with the unexpected. We just treat it as, you know what, life's full of hiccups. That's normal. I'm going to take that hour and I'm going to go find it somewhere else, even if I have to steal it back. All right, I got time for one more. Brian, does your research reveal digital calendars with reminders are more or less effective than print-based calendar systems? Why or why not? All right, great question. I have a good friend, AJ, who worked with us on the time blocking course that I mentioned earlier, and he's definitely a digital guy, and he is incredibly effective. So I personally have migrated to a combination of paper. I like to have a notebook to take notes in. I find that the manual act of writing things helps me remember them. But I do think that's a personal decision. But I will tell you, from a time blocking perspective, whatever you do, you need a big view on time. If you want to accomplish big things, you need a big perspective on time. So find a way to get that month at a glance. Can you look and see your time blocks? So you may have to use colors, right? You may have to do things that stand out in Outlook or on Google Calendars. And can you see it? I found it very frustrating to look at my calendar on my phone where I don't even see a full day. So it's very hard for me to get a bigger perspective on my goals. So that's the common denominator. Can you find a big perspective on your time, like a month at a time, or even a year at a time, so you can say, if I've got this big challenge, am I doing enough of that activity over the course of the year or the month to make it happen? That's my only bias. Okay, so I'm going to do one more, and then we'll have to save the rest for social media afterwards. And we'll wrap up with just a last couple of reminders, and I'll remind you of that special link to sign up. I've heard that more than 300 people have already applied, and that is just awesome. So how much time do you actually put aside each day? This is a question that comes from Michelle. I would tell you that depends on the activity. Some people set goals like, I want to exercise for 20 minutes a day. Well, clearly that's 20 minutes. If you're trying to meditate, my rule that if you probably heard thematically throughout, start small but think big. All right, you've got a big goal in mind. I want to become, the world champ in transcendental meditation. Well, why don't you start with 5 minutes a day? Because what'll happen is that you're sure to find 5 minutes, at least 5 minutes every day to do what you need to do. And you can build up momentum as you find success and build on that. And then maybe after you've got that established, you'll say, you know what, I'm going to go to 10, and then I'm going to go to 30. You build on that. So I think the time is relative to the task you're trying to achieve, the activity you want to do. But I always go with that principle, right? Think big, but I want you to start small, because let the power of exponential growth get behind you, but you have to be successful. So folks, thanks again for all your attention. We've got almost 800 people at the end of the hour. Y'all rock. Thank you so much for contributing all your questions and your advice. Lots of people gave us advice on how they were doing it. Please take the survey on the way out. It helps us get better and know what to do. This will be posted to our archive. The link is on the screen, the One Thing webinars. And our next webinar will be with Grant Cardone. He's the guy who wrote the 10X rule, which is a great companion to our book. It'll be on Thursday, February 25th. So guys, I want you to go out, I want you to time block, and I want you to have the most productive year ever. Hopefully I'll be seeing all of you on social media. And thanks again for your attention. I really appreciate it.